Did you know that 18 out of 21 phlebotomists agree that listening to Addressing Gettysburg's Patreon shows can help you prepare for the guide exam? If that's not convincing enough, you should hear what 6 out of 6.5 dentists say. It'll blow your mind. So help keep Addressing Gettysburg going and learn a ton, literally a ton, maybe even a metric ton. Wait, is that more? Well, either way, you can learn a lot from the hundreds of episodes we've produced for you over the last 5 years on our Patreon page. Many podcasts have a Patreon account, but only one treats it like a career and gives you something in return every week. And that's ours. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg to join today. First and second lieutenants get every episode we put out each month and then some. We thank you in advance.
The Gettysburg Museum of History, located right here in the center of Gettysburg, PA. Owner and curator Eric Dorr grew up here and has spent his life collecting and preserving history through artifacts ranging from the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, World War II, presidential items, pop culture, and more. His museum is free and open to visitors Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 5 p.m., where you can stop by and immerse yourself in some of the most amazing artifacts that you would never believe exist in the middle of Gettysburg. If you're a fan of Band of Brothers and Everything Easy Company, you'll love his exhibit featuring the Dick Winters collection and artifacts from D-Day. You can even own your own piece of history by buying one of the many relics they have for sale in the museum and on the website GettysburgMuseumofHistory.com. The Gettysburg Museum of History is a non-profit 501c3 organization with a foundation that allows all purchases and donations to keep the museum operating and open free of charge. They have been featured on the History Channel, the Travel Channel, the Smithsonian Channel, and the Science Channel. Now you can check them out on American Artifact, the series on the YouTube channel, The History Underground. And on a personal note, I'd like to thank the Gettysburg Museum of History for being a sponsor of Addressing Gettysburg by providing the studio that we recently moved to and do all of our shows from. So that's the Gettysburg Museum of History at 219 Baltimore Street or the GettysburgMuseumofHistory.com.
Hey, if you're in need of a sign and are in the Chambersburg area, you need not look any further than Bear Sign Service. They offer lighted and non-lighted signs, vehicle lettering and wraps, flags and flagpoles, and can ship anywhere. With over 75 years of being in business, Bear Sign Service is the oldest full-service sign company in Franklin County. So check them out at bearsign.com. That's BAERSIGN.com, and tell them you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg.
This episode of Addressing Gettysburg is brought to you in part by me, audiobook narrator Mike Scott. Narrator of Savis Beattie's Bloody Autumn, the Shenandoah Valley Campaign of 1864, and Unlike Anything That Ever Floated, the Monitor and Virginia and the Battle of Hampton Roads. If you are an author or publisher interested in having your titles produced as audiobooks, or even just in learning more about the process, give me a shout. You can find my contact info on my website, MikeScottVoice.com. That's MikeScottVoice.com.
Say you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Okay. Hey, this is Charlie Watts with History with Waffles, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios,
you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg's Ask a Gettysburg Guide. And today we have, once again, our mortal enemy, Jim Hessler, on with us. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Matt. How are you?
Good. I'm fine.
My annual Ask a Guide appearance.
Yes.
Right?
It seems that has been annual, yes.
Kind of.
Yeah, once a year.
Sometimes twice.
And then we'll have you on for a Patreon show about something a little more specific.
Yeah.
By the way, the Custer, Little Bighorn Connections and everything episode is still one of people's favorites.
Good.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, how many years ago is that? 3, 4, something like that now?
I would think probably at least 3 or 4. And I'll be honest, too, I still hear from people that are like, hey, I saw you do that Custer thing on Addressing Gettysburg. So I hear it, too. So it's good to know that we have that reach.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun to do, too.
So everything we do together is fun.
We do have fun together.
When have we not, even, Mortal Kombat, when have we still not had fun, right?
We enjoy that as well.
Exactly.
Well, we went to dinner the other night, a couple weeks ago, actually, and we had a good time there. It turned into a big, Like who's who.
A star-studded lineup of content providers just came walking in the door.
It's got to be surreal. And my apologies to the listeners out there who like for us to get right to the history, but it's got to be surreal for some people, I think, to see that. Because, you and I were just going out to dinner.
Right.
And then I go up to the hostess and I'm like, I put my name on the list and I turn around and Matt Atkinson is behind me with his friend, right?
Hey, little doodle bug, right? Right.
And then you arrive and then the four of us are talking over by the bar, waiting for our different tables. And then we get the idea, why don't we just get one table?
Put it together.
Yeah. And then we cancel one of the names off the list. And then 4 seats open up at the bar. And somebody's like, well, why don't we just sit here and have a drink while we're waiting? And then we're sitting there. We're like, well, why don't we just eat?
Yes.
At the bar.
Yes.
And we did. And we had fun. And then we were all ready to leave. And who walks in but Eric Dorr and Andy Biggio from The Rifle.
Right. Who I had not met before. I know Eric very well. I had not met Andy before.
Have you read The Rifle?
I have not yet.
You have to.
Do I?
You can borrow my copy if you'd like.
Okay.
But you borrow.
Put it on my nightstand in the big pile. Yeah.
Like every chapter is one guy's story, and they're not incredibly long. It's you can pick a random one. They're not tied together.
Okay.
It's just a really really cool book.
I've heard great things about it. I'll tell you what. Meeting Andy, he was very nice.
Yeah, great guy,
good guy,
awesome guy.
Yeah.
And he forced us to drink. And so we ended up staying maybe another hour or something like that, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we
had a lot of fun.
Get home at 10 o'clock. It's way past our bedtimes,
Yeah, I know. I know. It felt like midnight.
It did, really.
All right. So we're talking about Humphreys division here. Now, Humphreys division, beforehand I was preparing. I was going basically through the ORs and I was reading his report.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what I based this on. Used a little bit of Godfried's map book just to visualize certain things. And this one here, and ladies and gentlemen, I just want to recommend this to you. It's a very handy thing. Every Gettys nerd should have it in their library. This is volume 4 of Stephen Lunsford's Order of Battle, Gettysburg, the Army of the Potomac. Each volume is its own corps. You're saying, well, why isn't the third corps the third volume? Because one of the volumes is Army headquarters.
Oh,
yeah,
very clever.
So he's got all corps are out now, and now he's starting to work on the Army of Northern Virginia. But it's really handy.
And that handsome colorized photo of Third Corps Commander Daniel
Dapper Dan.
Sickles. Look at that. How could you not love that man?
Exactly.
Look at that.
Exactly.
And in living color. It's a beautiful cover.
It is a beautiful cover. So this is very helpful because it's a quick, you could just go in, find the division in this case that you're looking for, and there's just a lot of stats in there about all the way down to the regiment level too. So okay. So we're talking about that. First, give us a background though. Humphreys division is a veteran division. It's not one of these like new green divisions or anything. They've been around a while. Yeah,
they have. And, kind of the newest element is Humphreys himself, because he had only been he was a man of great experience, and I want to talk a little bit about his background tonight. But in terms of leading those men and leading that division, he had literally only been assigned over there after Chancellorsville. And so this Gettysburg is really his first time with them.
So but let's go to Chancellorsville real quick.
Yeah.
So Chancellorsville, 3rd Corps has 3 divisions.
Right.
Who is it?
So you've got David Birney, who's still with us. You've got Emil Whipple. And I'm drawing a blank. Hiram Berry.
Yes.
Hiram Berry. Folks, Jim Hessler's getting old. He doesn't remember stuff the way he used to. So it's Hiram Berry. So Berry and Whipple get killed at Chancellorsville. And so basically in all of the Army level reorgs that are going on after Chancellorsville, they now can consolidate these 3 divisions down into 2. And Humphreys gets moved over from the 5th Corps to now lead this consolidated 3rd Corps division.
Humphreys' background is what?
He is a man of science, which, that's one of the things that kind of appeals to me about the story. Humphreys' division, fight for the Emmitsburg Road, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a number of historians and guides who have different interpretations, and some like the topic more than others. If I could tell a quick personal story.
Sure.
Me and a couple friends were taking a tour of Fredericksburg a couple years ago. And of course, during the assault at Fredericksburg, Andrew Humphreys in command of a different division, 5th Corps, basically leads one of these last futile assaults against Marye's Heights, the stone wall. And they get hammered, like all of the Union troops do that day. So a couple years ago, me and my friends are taking a tour of Fredericksburg, and we have an esteemed Fredericksburg historian giving us the tour. I'm not going to say who it is, but he's a great guy and esteemed and all that stuff. And as we got to the stone wall, I'm like giddy as a schoolgirl. I want to hear about Humphreys. And I'm like, where was Humphreys? Because at Gettysburg, we tend to revere Humphreys as this kick-ass 3rd Corps West Pointer sort of thing. And anyways, the Fredericksburg guy lit into Humphreys. This guy was an idiot. This guy was a baboon. All of his men were laughing at him, and he was too arrogant to realize it.
Really?
And, I was crushed at the one level, but it was that great reminder that, we look at everybody through this Gettysburg prism.
Yeah.
But totality-wise, you could look at a totally different battle and have a totally different impression of these guys.
So what was his reason for him being a buffoon or baboon?
So when Humphrey's division is going to make that assault against Marye's Heights, he kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? He kind of gets... He's a little too excited about what is clearly going to be some carnage. Uh-huh. And so he's going up to the staff officers and things of that nature like, gentlemen, I'm going to lead the charge today. And you want to come with me, don't, and of course the guys are like, sure we do, General, sort of thing. And then heavy casualties. And afterwards, he's kind of like, writing his wife, honey, I felt like a god on a battlefield sort of thing. And I think sort of this juxtaposition between, what for us would be the 19th century military model of I wanted to be this hero versus the mass casualties that were inflicted. And I want to point out the mass casualties were obviously not his fault. They were the upper echelons ordering these assaults. But I think this sort of casual kind of, well, folks, that's military glory, I think kind of had the historian turned off. And again, this was several years ago. It was contrary to how I had previously thought of Humphreys. And I kind of started looking into his background more just to better understand him for, to whatever extent I could.
Was it like, kind of like when a nerd, like a bookworm, finally plays his first game of football and actually finds it interesting and fun and gets an adrenaline rush? Is that kind of the picture you got to paint?
I think there probably is some of that. Humphreys he was an engineer. He had West Point graduate, but pre-Civil War, Humphreys had done a lot of work with surveying at the railroads and did a lot of work on the Mississippi River surveys and things of that nature. But he always said to the effect, look, everybody thinks of me as a man of science, but I have more of a soldier in me than anything else. So yeah, I think he was, to your point, looking for that opportunity to really show himself on a battlefield. And to some extent, he does at Fredericksburg, and as we'll see, really kind of shows what he's made of at Gettysburg. So I think there's some truth in that, yeah.
And at Fredericksburg, he actually leads from the front.
Yeah, supposedly he gets 3 horses shot out from under him. Obviously a number of guys around him killed and wounded.
I can't imagine. So he's on horseback in front of his division or brigade? Division.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's not what order is what is it, 14 brigades that go up? Where?
He's right at the end, if I remember the sequence correctly.
Okay, so maybe it petered out from the Confederate point of view. They're kind of not as
because Fifth Corps is kind of a reserve. At Fredericksburg, you have the left and the center grand divisions and all that stuff. But if I remember the order of battle for Fredericksburg correctly, Fifth Corps is more in the reserve, and they kind of throw him in at the end.
Okay,
I don't know if the Rebs are petered out or not at that point, because again, his division, 4,000 guys or whatever the number is, suffers as many heavy casualties as anybody else.
Okay.
Somehow he gets
it's just so hard for me to imagine a general and his staff on horseback in front of all these men.
Yeah.
How is that not the first target of every Confederate behind that wall?
Yeah, and I think with just bullets and smoke and everything covering the battlefield. Yeah. And, now can we say, when we say in front, are we talking a George Custer-like charge. Probably not.
Right.
Probably because, infantry.
Maybe behind the 1st Brigade.
Yeah.
Maybe like between the 1st and 2nd Brigades.
Exactly. I'll be behind the skirmishers, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, we could probably sit here and have a little drinking game thinking about all the Civil War generals that we at least know by name that probably wouldn't do something like that.
Sure.
And Humphreys did. And
good point.
And it goes back to what we said. I think it was kind of the man of science. And I keep using the term science, but the man of science kind of saying, I'm looking for my opportunities on the battlefield. And Fredericksburg was definitely one of them.
He's a kind of profane guy. He's got a mouth on him.
Oh, it's funny you say that because I have a quote on that if I could. So he's this scientific guy. I'm just looking for a specific quote that he references somebody. So yeah, one of the interesting things about him, and you can imagine like a lot of old school West Pointers, he's got a mouth on him. Well, he's got more of a mouth because, as somebody said, he was, among the most brilliant users of profanity within the Army. So when I was originally doing my Humphreys stuff, a couple of years ago, putting this together, I came across a letter from a mother. Her son serves under him, probably I think just a guy in the rank and file. And the mother writes to him and says, quote, "Honorable sir, you are a stranger to me, but I have heard you spoken of as a gentleman, but a profane swearer. I must say no man is fit to command that can't command his own tongue."
Ooh,
and Humphreys replied to Mom. He didn't just sort of do the, and throw it in the wastebasket kind of thing. He replies to Mom, and he kind of says, first of all, I like this because he refers to himself in third person. "General Humphreys, it is true, swears at his fellow man, but never at the Almighty, and only when carried away by an irresistible burst of passion." So yeah, that's
okay.
that's kind of one way of addressing it. I think definitely he's known as a profane guy, and if I'm not mistaken, I think we had a question or two
about that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get then to his division at Gettysburg. First of all, who are the people in his neighborhood? Who are the brigade commanders in his division?
Yeah, so basically in his division, he's got Brigadier General Joseph Carr.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Carr's brigadier generalship had actually not gone through, had not been confirmed by the time of Gettysburg. So technically, Carr is still a colonel at Gettysburg, if you want to get technical on that, even though we always refer to him as a general, and he eventually did get confirmed on that. Carr is important to the fight at Gettysburg because if you think about Humphreys' line fighting at Gettysburg along the Emmitsburg Road, it's really Carr's brigade in the front line on that.
Okay.
So that's so that makes him pretty important. Carr's an Irish immigrant. He's got, again, kind of an interesting story, a couple of anecdotes. There's one allegation. And notice I'm saying allegation because it's a good story versus, say, uncontested fact.
Okay.
One of the officers in one of the regiments in his brigade, a guy by the name of Henry Blake. So do we have any MASH fans in the audience?
Yeah, no. Oh, in the audience, yes.
I see Lance. I hear Lance laughing.
Yes, sure.
Right. So in this part of the field, we got a Henry Blake, we got a Major Burns, and we got a Colonel Pierce over at the Peach Orchard. But no hot lips that I know of. So anyways, Henry Blake is a guy in the 11th Mass, and he writes this great book about life in the Army of the Potomac. And I love Henry Blake because he seems like he hates everybody. Just very sort of I'm our kind of guy, kind of a sarcastic, dry sense of humor. So anyways.
Ball buster.
Yeah, a little bit of a stone chopper. So anyways, Blake has this account that is used a lot, and you'll see it reprinted a lot, where Blake says something to the effect of, "We were commanded by this blockhead general, and we always knew that when he was around, there would be no fighting. But he had taught at a dance school of low character prior to the war, and the men would sometimes razz him by saying promenade on the bar when he rode by." Now, he doesn't say that's Carr, but damn it, if it isn't Carr, it should be, because it's kind of too great of an anecdote to kind of pass up.
Okay.
So somebody out there on Patreon, go do some original Joseph Carr research and find out what the name of that dance hall was, and we can kind of confirm that. So 1st Brigade, and again, they're going to be Emmitsburg Road, so they're kind of important.
Okay, so they're this is something interesting that I don't think I'd ever, if I had heard it, it hadn't sunk in before. But they get lost on the way. Well, I mean, lost, misdirected.
Yeah. Yes. So the whole division does. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So June 30th and into the morning of July 1st, with the rest of the Third Corps, they're in Emmitsburg. And I remember the story. They're in Emmitsburg. Fighting's going on at a little crossroads town called Gettysburg. And first Reynolds and then Howard are sending messages to come forward.
Right.
Okay. So they're leaving. So they're in Emmitsburg. Sickles kind of has a little bit of angst. Should I stay? Should I go? Meade wants me here. Really doesn't move forward until the afternoon, about 4:00. Meanwhile, Humphreys, who we didn't mention this, but Humphreys from his 5th Corps tenure was a really good friend of George Meade's. Him and Meade like each other, and Meade seems to have given Humphreys this independent assignment to go off and do some engineering work, reconnoitering of the Emmitsburg area, and tell me what the lay of the land is like. So this order comes in to go to Gettysburg. Sickles leaves with Birney's division because Birney is a Sickles guy at about 4:00. Humphreys isn't with his division; he's off doing his thing. So his division leaves without him.
Okay.
All right. Now, they say they're coming to Gettysburg on a parallel road. Sickles and Birney are on the Emmitsburg Road. Humphrey's division says they're on a parallel road. We can talk more in the Q&A about some different theories on that. But while they're en route, Humphreys then has to catch up to his division, and a staff officer from the 3rd Corps gets sent out and basically says to the effect of, hey, I've been told to lead you in, so they're following this guy. When they get around Black Horse Tavern Road, Humphreys is thinking, okay, we probably need to steer to the right to go to Gettysburg. The staff officer gets something screwed up and says, no, General Sickles wants you to go out via the Fairfield Road. So they do a detour basically all the way out, and they end up around the Black Horse Tavern, which, folks, is under Confederate control at this point. So this is now, nighttime of July 1st. We're behind Confederate lines.
Yeah.
And so Humphrey's division is approaching the Black Horse Tavern, 9, 10 o'clock at night. They see Confederate artillery on the hill. Supposedly some guys go up and kind of look in the window of the tavern, and they see some Rebs, in the and then they got to backtrack and backpedal their way back. And they don't get in until probably the head of the column probably doesn't arrive in and around Cemetery Ridge till about, 10, 11 o'clock at night. So it's a long day for these guys. Long day.
So I think later on, did he write an autobiography or somebody wrote a biography about him?
Yeah, he doesn't have one, but somebody else has written a little bit about him. And I think one of the things with him, there isn't a lot on him. There's a lot of anecdotes in books, but I mean, you can't go to your Addressing Gettysburg bookshelf and pick out 3 to 5 Andrew Humphreys biographies. They're not there. So
no, I checked.
Yeah, you checked.
You can't really do it. But okay, but I guess it was in this biography that he's quoted from something talking about this.
Yeah,
and he says that he later found out from, I think, the tavern owner that he was minutes away from the Confederates coming armed and occupying that area.
Yeah, there's something about, I met up with Mr. Bream, who was the tavern owner after the war and that sort of thing. And yeah, you get different versions of this. In one version he says, if I'd been given the order to attack, I would have captured them all, kind of thing. But yeah, that's, hey man, you're behind enemy lines in the middle of the night. Who knows what you're going to step into.
And it's one thing, it's not like you're a squad of cavalry scouting. You're a division.
Right.
I mean, that's not easy to just turn around and skedaddle.
That's exactly right. Because I'm sure there's probably somebody listening going, well, division 4,000 can probably kick some ass. Oh, wait a minute, you're hogtied onto this narrow road in the pitch black. Yeah, it's not going to be easy to deploy.
And the terrain's not that great on either side of that road in that area there. So it's it's not like coming down the Chambersburg Pike with open fields on either side.
Right.
Right.
And the other thing too, I'll mention since we're talking about it. A lot of some of this area, as I'm looking at in the shadow of the round tops on your desk over there.
There it is, yep.
Some of this area is going to be traversed by Longstreet's troops on July 2nd, as part of Longstreet's countermarch to get into position. And part of what this episode reminds me is that if you find the right road, it can actually be pretty darn easy to get around the flank and the rear of the Union Army. Because Humphreys, despite the disadvantages we just talked about, is basically going to backtrack the division, tippy-toe, back down the Black Horse Tavern Road, and eventually end up where they're supposed to be on Cemetery Ridge. And the fact that in some ways Longstreet, some of the other Confederate high command are going to try to use a lot of that same route to get into position to hit the Union left on July 2nd tells me how critical those roads were. And if you get the right conditions, how easy it could be to kind of slip in and out between the lines.
Yeah.
So think about that.
All right, so they get to Cemetery Ridge. When do they actually deploy into the position that they're going to? Because they bivouac kind of like on the east side of the Emmitsburg Road ridge, isn't that right?
Well, yeah. So the night of the 1st into the morning of the 2nd, I would kind of have them bivouacking kind of on the left hand to the left to the west of what is Hancock Avenue today.
Okay.
It's kind of, if you think about it, you're standing out near Father Corby or that. Hancock Avenue, you kind of go down into a swale a little bit. Then you've got the Trossel Farm over here. And then the ground kind of gently kind of rises up to the Emmitsburg Road.
A gentle rise.
I'm trying to get braver with adjectives. So
Good. I like gentle rise. That was good.
Rise.
Yeah.
So to your question, though, they're there in the morning. During mid-afternoon, they start moving progressively forward towards the Emmitsburg Road. You're right. At one point, then they are kind of just a couple hundred yards just on the eastern. I'm making diagrams here for the folks watching on Patreon. They're sort of for a little while on the eastern side of the Emmitsburg Road Ridge. And then sometime around 4 o'clock is part of Sickles' grand move, Humphrey's guys move, and Matt, all hell breaks loose at that point.
So, but no, wait. So they stay in. You're not. Maybe I misunderstood what you're saying here. So you're not saying that they stayed in bivouac on the eastern slope of the Emmitsburg Road.
No. They got out of bivouac to move
to Cemetery Ridge. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
And
so they go from bivouac Cemetery Ridge. Eventually, then they get out of bivouac as the day goes on and start moving closer to the Emmitsburg Road. And then at about 4 o'clock, there's one description of this. I want to say massed in column by battalions. I think
yes,
one of the descriptions.
That's the one I read today.
Yeah. So for anybody out there who really wants to get into the nitty gritty of the tactics and all of that stuff, they're just for a while they're just massed in these columns before, which gives you the opportunity to move when you need to move. Right.
So now it's funny because when I'm reading his report, he doesn't mention anything and probably didn't know about Sickles's I want to go out. No, you can't go out. I want to go out, but you can't go out. Oh, well, that's this guy. Like that whole thing.
Yeah.
Does he not know about it? I mean, he's friends with Meade. You would think that he might.
Well, to me, this is what interests me in the story. Not, our guys in column or line or sort of thing. To me, part of the thing that's interesting is the dynamics. Because, let's make sure folks understand this. You have Andrew Humphreys, a West Pointer, and a Meade partisan now commanding a division in the anti-Meade 3rd Corps. And as anybody who has read my extensive writing on the topic knows, Bernie, commanding the other division, who is a Sickles guy, is not a Meade guy. So it's personalities. I like the personality stuff, and there's a great opportunity for friction here. And so to the point of your question, Matt, Humphreys says a couple of times in his report, and I think he says it again later during his testimony during the Committee on the Conduct of the War, he basically says to the effect, I didn't hear from General Sickles all day. I did what I was supposed to do. I stayed with my division unless sent for, and I wasn't sent for.
Right.
And so all of this yin and yang back and forth that's going on between Meade and Sickles, Humphreys is pretty much out of the loop on that. And I think a lot of people listen to that and go, well, wait a minute, Humphreys was the trained West Pointer and a world-class engineer. Why wouldn't you include Humphreys in that? And they didn't because they didn't want to. Right?
Okay.
Sickles don't want to.
Yeah.
Oh, you're Meade's boy.
Yeah,
I got my boys over here.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
you kind of just keep the people that are going to rubber stamp you and go along with whatever.
Make you feel good. Right? We hang out with people who make us feel good. Our annual dinner, right?
That just makes us feel good.
Makes us feel good. Right.
The rest of the year, I hang out with people who make me feel terrible.
Exactly, like Lance over there, right? Coughing all over the equipment, right?
I caught that too. Nice little cough into the mic. He's dead silent, and he just goes.
I love it. All right.
But I do have a question, if I'm allowed.
Wait. So the Humphreys, I'll get to you in a second, Mike. Humphreys' report was written, or it's dated August 16th.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Now, between the end of the battle and August 16th, he's on Army staff now.
He's finally chief of staff, right?
Yes. Well, so it makes it even more interesting to me because here it's like you've been hanging around Meade. No doubt Meade is griping and bitching, right? At some point, like he has to talk about Sickles, and he's got to be furious at Sickles. He's got to be catching wind. When does Meade catch wind? It's not until later, like in the winter, I think, right, where he catches wind that he's being bashed down in Washington.
And all that stuff. Yeah, so you're right. So Humphreys finally accepts that appointment to chief of staff on July 8th. And as most people probably know, Meade had offered the assignment to his friend Humphreys prior to the battle. And Humphreys has said no, because I want to stay in a field command position. But yeah, to your question, Meade says, and I think it's probably true, Meade says he really doesn't really appreciate how much he's being dissed until early spring of 1864, when the Gettysburg portion of the Committee of the Conduct of the War is kicking off, and Meade goes to Washington and kind of says, oh, heavens, look at what everybody's saying about me. And I think that's really his first, oh, crap moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're on Cemetery Ridge. They're in line. 4 p.m. They move out to the forward position that they're going to take. Humphreys is along the Emmitsburg Road.
Yeah. So we didn't, in our little introduction, we didn't mention his other two brigades, but as we said,
that's true.
He's so riveted by what I'm saying. He's not even like, oh, no,
I don't even really care about what I have written down.
I think he just has a bias against the Excelsior Brigade. That's all there is to it.
Wow, that's who's coming in next.
Excelsior. So Mike had a question before we get into that. Let's give Mike the microphone there. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but appropriate for this topic. When we always see that Ken Burns documentary series, that famous Hancock quote, seeing Shelby Foote talk about it, seeing Sickles go out there and he'll be tumbling on back. Was that seeing Humphrey's division deploying, or did the Third Corps go out all at once, or was it done in drip and drabs throughout the day?
Yeah, I love your questions because you know the answer. Go ahead.
He's my friend Steve Floyd does that too. Steve, why don't you just tell me the answer, kind of thing.
Right.
But it's a great question, and thanks, Mike. So to kind of cover all of that, my take has always been mostly drips and drabs, and kind of moving Devil's Den, Wheatfield, Peach Orchard, but then for our extents and purposes today to the Emmitsburg Road. Yeah, the Hancock thing has always been one of those interesting conundrums on this. I personally think, given about where Hancock would have been at that moment in time, what I think Hancock is primarily seeing going out to the Emmitsburg Road is, yes, Humphrey's division, right? And he has that famous quote, gentlemen, they're all going to come tumbling back kind of thing. And again, people often hear that quote and say, my God, why didn't somebody run to headquarters? Because in the Army, you don't do that.
Right,
you don't just leave your command and do that. So anyways, that's my take on it, Mike.
So, okay, now let's get back to, they move out to the Emmitsburg Road, and Hancock sees them. And so they get out to the road. You've got Carr, that's what you wanted. You have Carr's brigade. Who else?
And so Carr's along the Emmitsburg Road. So we finally get to the long delayed introduction to the Excelsiors.
Yes.
Right? Colonel William Brewster's brigade. And that was, of course, Sickles' old guys that he had raised in New York. So you have Brewster's Brigade, the Excelsiors. They're going to initially kind of take a position somewhat behind Carr and an Echelon, but we'll see as the fighting starts, they get moved around. But doorbell.
It's okay. Michael got it. Thanks, Mike.
From somebody. So the third brigade though is Colonel George Burling with about 1,300 men.
Mike, could you shut this door, please? Thanks. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay.
It's the magic of a live show.
There you go. Yeah, folks, we're just sorry. Is this live, by the way, everywhere? Or
it's just live on Patreon. Yeah, but I don't cut this stuff out.
I know. Yeah, I know. I've noticed that you edit nothing. I like it.
Please.
Even some stuff I've listened to in the past, I'm like, God damn it, why didn't he edit that? You don't edit anything.
No, because I'd have to sit and listen to the whole damn show.
I know.
Yeah,
poor baby. All right. So, anyways, Third Brigade, Colonel George Burling. And they're further behind. And this is an important brigade from Humphrey's perspective because this brigade is going to be parceled out during the course of the day to support Birney.
Yeah.
It is not going to be at Humphrey's disposal. So I'll do the math here, folks. He starts with 3 brigades. He basically loses one of them, or about a third of his command, that he doesn't have at his disposal. And you're talking about reading his report, reading his testimony before the Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War. Humphreys was a little pissed.
Yep.
May I read a quote?
Go ahead.
Quote, had my division been left intact, I should have driven the enemy back, but this ruinous habit, it don't deserve the name of system, of putting troops in position and then drawing off reserves and a second line to help others who, if similarly disposed, would need no such help, is disgusting. And that's how he kind of views the systemic use of his reserves by Sickles and then later Birney.
So he's down a third of his force.
Yeah.
And does he keep do any of the regiments from Burling's brigade remain with him, or are they all parceled out?
Yeah, I think they're pretty much all parceled out. Some of them are over in the Peach Orchard area, so they're not too far away.
Okay, they're not far away.
But in his particular zone, it's pretty much
because the 7th New Jersey is over near the Peach Orchard.
I think only the 5th New Jersey is anywhere close because they're out on the skirmish line.
Yeah, they're still on the skirmish line. Yeah.
Okay, but the rest of them are basically going down towards Brigade on Bernie's far left.
Exactly. Some of them were down in the Valley of Death, Devil Den area, a little bit of wheat field action. Yeah,
all over the place.
All over God's creation.
All right, and so continue then.
Yeah, and you're right. 5th New Jersey, about 200 men. So the rest of them are gone though. So
they're out on the skirmish line.
Yeah,
and how long after, I forget what it was now. How long after Bernie's Humphrey's division is in place, do the Confederates attack?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. Humphreys says, as we've said a couple times, Humphrey says it's 4 o'clock or a little bit after when he kind of gets his orders and then kind of moves in. If you're thinking, obviously then you've got Hood's division stepping off further down, Devil's Den, Little Round Top, around 4 o'clock. Cadmus Wilcox, who will eventually go head-to-head with Humphreys, says he steps off around 6:20.
Okay.
So, if you want to say 2 hours-ish, something. And look, folks, I hate this. I am not a what time was it kind of guy. But again, just to give you a general idea, how long does it take and how does that tie into relationships between other events? If you take the 4 o'clock from Humphrey's report and the 6:20 from Wilcox, you're talking give or take about 2 hours.
All right, so Seeley's battery is part of his division there, and they're going to be placed. I was reading this, and he refers to them going down around a log home, a log house.
Yes.
Is that the Klingel farm?
Yes, it is.
It is the Klingel farm.
So yeah, you're right. So they talk. Couple times you'll see references to a log home, a log cabin kind of thing, and that's the Klingels.
So it's the Klingel farm, and then they're on the right of the Klingel farm, but eventually they'll be moved to the left once I guess the Confederate batteries open.
Yeah, that's what it seems to be. Yep. Seeley gets moved around a little bit. Then a little while later, they're going to bring in Turnbull's battery to also support. So you've got basically in Humphrey's zone, he's getting support from 2 batteries. So 6 guns each, so 12 guns, and they're outnumbered by what Alexander is deploying over on Warfield and Seminary Ridges.
Right now, so as well, we may not all know this in the audience, so we'll explain this in the audience that the Confederate attack is an echelon attack, meaning what?
Yeah, so I'm not sure that I buy into that.
Oh.
That's a long-standing second-day debate, with Gettysburg nerds. Is it an echelon attack sort of thing?
So, but just explain to people, because they're going to read that. If they're new, they're going to come across this term.
Sure. So whether it's a planned echelon attack or not, generally speaking, Longstreet's assault tends to step off a brigade at a time. Brigade steps off, then the brigade on your left moves, then the brigade on their left moves, then the brigade on their left moves. Again, some debate over whether this is intentional or not, but for lack of a better word, this is generally how it seems to play off.
And now, are they moving, what's the interval of time before the next one goes? Because there's also a second line of brigades that are going to go after them.
Right. And, so from the front line, the idea was initially, a lot of the regimental and even some of the brigade commanders seem to have the idea that they're supposed to be stepping off instantaneously. So and that doesn't happen. So from the point of view of brigade steps off, the brigade on my right, let's say, steps off, and now it's my turn to step off. A couple matter of minutes in terms of how long do you see it, how long does it take to get your men together and formed up and go. So I don't think it's a significant amount of time, although you do see some instances kind of like Robertson's brigade over at Houck's Ridge and some of that stuff where some of the Confederate brigade commanders are like, hey, where the hell is the support on my left? Kind of thing. Now, for our talk tonight, which is, focusing more along that Emmitsburg Road front, William Barksdale's brigade steps off, let's say, sake of argument, about 6 o'clock. They're sort of the leftmost brigade in Longstreet's First Corps. After that, then you start to trip over into A.P. Hill's zone and Richard Anderson's division. And so Cadmus Wilcox, old Billy Fixon, who's got kind of that 1st Brigade in Anderson's division, he says he kind of steps off more or less simultaneously after he sees Barksdale moving forward, but because Barksdale is still in his front, he's got to sidestep to his left to kind of uncover Barksdale. And again, that how much does that add? I don't know, 10 minutes, whatever, 15, whatever you want to make it.
Roundabout, where would Wilcox be starting from?
Yeah, good question. So Wilcox would kind of be starting in and around the Spangler Farm on Seminary.
By the Florida Monument?
Yeah, over on Seminary Ridge. So if you kind of go, if you're at the Klingel Farm, and this is one of the reasons why I like doing the topic, because it's not one that's a lot of people do on the battlefield.
Right.
So if you go to the Klingel Farm, carefully, folks, look both ways. Don't be listening to Addressing Gettysburg or the Battle of Gettysburg podcast on your favorite device.
Or music or anything else.
But if you kind of do that cross over the Emmitsburg Road and you look at the Henry Spangler Farm and the woods behind it, you actually get a nice view of, give or take, about where they would have stepped off.
Okay.
But yeah, about where the Florida Monument is, because Lang's brigade is going to get involved and all that stuff.
So they, so back to the reason I brought up the echelon attack is because I just want to get it into the head of somebody who's new to this thing listening, because this is kind of, especially when you get into the nitty gritty, especially with Birney's division and the wheat field, that's where it really gets confusing. But we're dealing with Humphreys, which, as you point out, not a lot of people talk about, but
even less people go to.
Right. But they get into, they have some pretty good fighting.
Yeah, they have some great fighting.
And so the left of Sickles' position is Birney's division. So to the left of Humphreys is Birney.
Yes, correct.
And Birney is basically facing Hood's division of Longstreet's corps.
Hood and McLaws.
And part of McLaws,
Right.
So he's getting it from two sides. He's getting it from his front and his right.
Because he's created that dangerous and awkward salient, right?
Right.
Or his front and his left. Yeah,
Front is, I'm sorry.
That way. Yeah. Just not to confuse.
No, it's his right. His left is Ward.
Yeah, but you said he's getting it from his front and his left.
Yeah.
Right?
No, right. I said right.
No, you said right, but he'd be getting it. So if I'm Bernie and my left, this is how I'm looking at the orientation. Yeah. If I'm Bernie, and my left is Devil's Den,
correct.
And let's say my center is Wheatfield-ish, and then let's say my kind of right is Peach Orchard,
right.
Left. I'm kind of getting it from left and front.
Oh,
that's how I'm looking at it.
Okay, I see. But then eventually, Confederates are going to come. Like, what would it be? Kershaw's a little further in front. Who's after Kershaw?
So after then
is that Wofford?
Well, Barksdale's going to hit the Peach Orchard first.
Semmes, that's what I'm thinking.
And then so you got Kershaw and Semmes in the Wheatfield, but for us today, Barksdale hits the Peach Orchard.
Right.
Wofford comes in after Barksdale.
Okay.
But for our intents and purposes today, remember when Barksdale hits that Peach Orchard, 3 of his regiments veer off to their left.
Yes.
They start kind of going in as an angle. They're now going to hit Humphrey's left. And then Wilcox, who we just met a few minutes ago, he's going to step out and hit the front. Folks, if you're listening to this at home, pull out Phil Lano's Atlas or Brad Gottfried's book. Pull out a good map book and kind of follow along.
You can't.
It makes
absolutely.
Exactly. It makes more sense.
Okay, so the salient, though, that you're talking about, is that created by Bernie's units entirely, or is that where Bernie's right meets Humphrey's left?
See, to me, the salient is where Bernie's left pivots back from the Peach Orchard through the Wheatfield and then ultimately to Devil's Den. And in later years, Sickles and his boys said the reason that they pivoted the line like that was because they wanted to prevent getting outflanked if anybody comes up the Emmitsburg Road.
Sure.
Now, during Humphrey's fight, when this is why I introduced Barksdale a few minutes ago, when Barksdale's 3 regiments kind of crashed through the Sherfy farm and the Wentz farm, and that's Wentz, not Lentz. But as they kind of pivot through the Wentz farm and the Sherfy farm, Barksdale's 3 regiments are potentially coming in behind Humphrey's left. So now the Excelsior Brigade is going to kind of also do a similar maneuver, kind of swing like a door, like the 20th Man in the movie.
Right,
you guys are movie guys, right? Swing like a door. But eventually, Humphrey's guys are also going to kind of swing back their left to try to prevent getting outflanked in that direction. So it's a similar formation, but when we talk about Sickles salient, we're really talking more about Bernie at the Peach Orchard than what Humphreys is doing here.
Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay. So, all right. So if let's just say the prevailing story that it's an echelon attack meaning,
right.
And the idea of this is like, we attack on the far left of a line, and then soon after a little further up, and then the idea being that the enemy that you're attacking is moving reserves to those points of attack, weakening the rest of their line,
which you're then going to hit
next. Which you're going to hit next, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got a second line, or Longstreet does at least, a second line of brigades that are going to go in and mop up.
Yep.
That's the idea.
That's the idea. That's the idea. That's the
okay.
idea.
So let's say that does happen. Humphreys, for a while, I guess, is observing this going on to his left.
Yeah.
And his skirmishers might be engaged, but there's that point where Barksdale's itching to go in and Longstreet's like, hold on a minute,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you're right. And so Humphreys talks about this. He says, for a while all of that craziness is going on at his left, Humphrey says, for a while it was quiet on my front. And again, this also too, they draw another Excelsior regiment away from him, and they go more over towards the Peach Orchards. So again, they're still drawing off of Humphreys, thinking that at least as of yet, he's not in any danger. And then, as I said, when 3 of Barksdale's regiments smash the Peach Orchard and pivot left, they're headed for Humphreys, and right about at that same time, coming at Humphreys' front is Wilcox. So now Humphrey's going to get it from 2 sides.
Sounds like a real mess.
It is. It's a hot mess. It's
a hot mess. That's a good one. All right, so there we go. So now that we've got you completely confused and you can't visualize
pull out a map book. It's easy. It's easy.
It really is.
You know what? Even better. Hire a licensed battlefield guide and have that guide show it to you on the field.
That's the best way to go.
There's only so much you can do in a studio, folks.
Damn right about that. Okay, so now the fighting is underway. The skirmish line comes back in. Walk us through the fighting of Humphrey's division.
Yeah, so Wilcox, there's some debate. It's I guess, a relatively minor debate. But basically, Wilcox's attack, now stepping off and hitting Carr's brigade front along the Emmitsburg Road, is more or less simultaneous with Barksdale's guys coming in on Humphrey's left. So he's kind of, like I said, he's kind of getting it from two ends here at the same time. Seeley's guys are firing away with their artillery. Humphreys was very praiseworthy of Seeley's guys afterwards, but they're hitting Wilcox's men with canister fire. Barksdale's guys are well motivated and they're charging through, and bodies are kind of dropping anywhere. About this time, though, a grievous event occurs that changes the course of American history. Of course, the wounding of Dan Sickles.
Oh, yes, of course.
And so when he's wounded, he turns command of the 3rd Corps over to
Birney.
Yes, not West Point or Humphreys, because simple reason being Birney outranks Humphreys. So when he turns command of the Corps over to Birney probably realizes everything is going to hell. He tells Humphreys in part, swing back your left, connect with my retreating men, and we will do a fighting retreat back to Cemetery Ridge.
So unlike, now I don't know if everybody was under this impression, but my impression always was that it was a like collapse of the line and, you know, pockets of resistance occurred. But for the most part, it was just like not a rout per se, but close to a rout, and until everybody got back to Cemetery Ridge.
Well, you know, probably depends on who you talk to, right?
Okay.
I do think, and this is part of it too, so when Humphreys is ordered to swing back, connect with Birney. Humphreys primarily with the Excelsiors, also a hinge with the 11th New Jersey. We said we weren't going to go too deep into the regimental stuff. But anyways, they kind of swing back. There's no Birney line to connect with.
Nah.
So I do think probably there's at least a good amount of confusion and chaos going in Birney's line. But damn it, Humphreys is not the kind of guy to let his line fall apart. So he's kind of holding it. But yeah, there's a lot of confusion and chaos. Is Humphreys left and the Excelsiors kind of swings back. A lot of number of Birney's guys retreating from the Peach Orchard supposedly are kind of running through Humphreys' line. So imagine now you're trying to hold your formations together and you got guys kind of running through, you know, saying, "Run, boys, the day's lost and we're whipped," and stuff like that, which makes it harder for Humphreys and his officers to kind of hold it together. So I think, again, depends on who you talk to or where you're at.
Now, so when what is this, Brewster that swings back, right, to connect with Birney? Where about is that? It's not on the Wheatfield Road, is it? That's more like the Trossel Farm Lane.
Yeah, exactly. So modern day, I always use modern day United States Avenue, the Trossel Farm Lane. I always use that as kind of a decent dividing line between Birney and Humphreys.
Okay.
And I usually tell people, you know, if you're just trying to visualize this, and let's say you're on the field or looking at a map and you're trying to visualize it relatively simply, Birney's line ends on what would kind of be the south side of that lane. Humphreys' line kind of picks up. So where is it on the field? If you go to the Klingel property again today, to the left of the Klingel property is the 11th New Jersey Monument. Kind of envision that line kind of swinging back like a door at about where the 11th New Jersey Monument is. And that might give you kind of an idea, just swinging back through the field that Today is just an empty field.
Yeah, there's I would assume the fence line is still there. Well, actually, I think that's Sickles Avenue. Like Sickles Avenue, at that point, if it goes along that fence line, it basically looks like it's going along the line that you're talking about, because the 11th I'm sorry, I'm looking at the 11th Mass. Forgive me, ladies and gentlemen. 11th New Jersey. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it.
Klingle
Farm.
Right?
There you go. I'm way up. I'm way up the road. Yeah. Okay. Never mind. Disregard what I said.
Yeah, and if you think about it too, the 120th New York Monument, which is kind of I always sort of in my mind's eye, I envision this line swinging back from the 11th New Jersey along the road to the 120th New York, which, yes, today sits on modern day Sickles Avenue. And if you go there, you stand there in that field, you can envision, at least I can see Barksdale's 3 regiments coming. And if I'd been in that line, not only would I be fight Barksdale in the front, I'd have Wilcox and then Lang's Florida Brigade coming in on my right and my rear. It's perilous stuff.
It is scary stuff because, like typically it seems that a Confederate unit against a Union unit, it seems to be that there's always more men in the Confederate unit, at least 100 more or so. Does that kind of hold true here? With the detachment of Burling's brigade, we've definitely got a little bit of a man advantage for the Confederates, at least on paper. Because if you throw in 3/4 of Barksdale, all of Wilcox, and then eventually Lang's small, but nevertheless Florida Brigade is going to step off, you've probably got all in on the Confederate side in this particular attack. I think probably on paper about 3,500 guys. Carr and Brewster, give or take about 3,100 guys. Okay, so about the same.
Yeah, so they definitely they do favor the Confederates a little bit. Again, on paper, again, who knows what casualties Barksdale's incurred up to this point, but that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
I have a question.
Michael Lentz.
Yes. I read in the report from Humphreys that he sent for help from Winfield Scott Hancock in the 2nd Corps. Were any units sent out to help the 3rd Corps from the 2nd Corps?
Right. So that's part of the contention. I mean, that's a little bit of a bone of contention. You've got a couple of these units in the 2nd Corps who do get moved forward towards the Emmitsburg Road, kind of in and around the Kadori property. And there was some commentary afterwards and later on in terms of, did Humphreys think he was authorized to draw off the 2nd Corps, or was it just kind of something that they did on their own? But you do have a couple of 2nd Corps regiments, as I know Mike, kind of pushing forward, as well as Weir's Battery, Gillian Weir's Battery, in and around kind of that Kadori farm area around the Emmitsburg Road. And so what they're doing kind of in Echelon, though, is offering at least what would be some level of protection to Humphrey's right flank.
So as they fall back to Cemetery Ridge, Bigelow's battery. Now that's not part of Humphrey's division, correct?
Correct.
That is part of the reserves.
Well, yes.
Reserve artillery.
So they were along the Wheatfield Road further up, and they're part of the retreat and the fallback from the Peach Orchard and the Wheatfield Road, and they're getting hogtied, as I'm sure you know, at the Trussell Farm, which in this would be behind Humphreys.
So another thing, you mentioned before that when Brewster kind of changes his front and to link up with Birney, there is no Birney to link up with.
Right.
And is that because there's that gap between basically what I guess Stony Hill, or at this point they're probably pushed back now more along Wheatfield? This is why it gets so confusing to me.
Yeah. And it does. So I think what's happening in the meantime is the guys, at least the way I look at it, the guys that Brewster would probably have to link up with, in my view, would be retreating troops from the Peach Orchard.
Okay.
Graham's brigade and any remnants, some of Burling's guys are in around the Peach Orchard. So you'd have guys retreating from the Peach Orchard. While I do think, and folks, you should read all about this in our book, Gettysburg's Peach Orchard, I do think, I don't want to disparage the guys or like some of the New Jersey guys of that who fight in and around the Peach Orchard area, but they would, in my view, be the easiest ones to link up with, and for various reasons, they don't reform, and they're not there.
We from New Jersey like to often just not be there when we're needed most.
When counted on, I know.
It's just the way it is. I'm sorry. It's just in the water. Okay, so now, so they get back to Cemetery Ridge.
Yeah.
And now, I always thought, they get back to Cemetery Ridge, and they're basically useless.
Yeah.
And Willard's brigade comes in front of them and pushes Barksdale back, and Wilcox and the 1st Minnesota, and all this stuff is going on, and the 39th New York over on the left, and, and Malbone Watson and all this stuff. And I'm always imagining Humphreys' division maybe hanging out in the woods or on the Tawnytown Road, all shivering and holding each other and crying, they're just traumatized, just completely,
So traumatized they can't even have coffee, Matt? My God.
Nobody can get themselves together enough to make
Taco night? Can we make some tacos?
They can chew the coffee beans, maybe.
All right.
But anyway, but that's not true. So they reform.
Right.
And some of them actually follow Willard out to the Emmitsburg Road.
Well, may I? Because we did skip what is really Humphrey's, I think, defining moment.
Go for it.
So but you're right. So his guys are getting hammered. Lang's brigade comes in. Carr's guys along the Emmitsburg Road are threatened left, right, front, and all that sort of thing. And as that line starts to break, and as the Excelsior line starts to break, we have this great moment where Humphreys, kind of like we were prefacing or foreshadowing with the Fredericksburg stuff, we got this moment. Can I read a couple of quotes about this?
Please do.
Because, folks, they were there. They can describe it much better than our poor power to add or detract kind of thing.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay. One guy said, quote, being the only troops on the field, the enemy's whole attention was directed to my division, that's Humphreys, which was forced back, slowly firing as they receded. Seeley, battery we talked briefly about, said Humphreys was, quote, in the midst of the tornado, bareheaded and unattended, endeavoring to rally the retreating infantry of the 3rd Corps. And I'm just going to read one more quote. Thomas Rafferty of the Excelsior's 71st New York, quote, Humphreys could not hold his men, for as soon as they found themselves assailed in both front and flank, they broke and retreated. But the confusion was momentary, for although disrupted and somewhat in disorder, they had a soldier for a leader. They were soldiers themselves, and they immediately rallied. And this is what Humphreys says he does later. He says he refused to retreat at the double quick before the enemy. So Humphreys says him and his staff, unhorsed, on foot, bandana, kind of Rambo-like tied around the head.
Right.
They got behind the line and they prevented the movement from turning into a rout. And this is what he says, quote, 20 times did I bring my men to a halt and face about to return the Confederate fire. To return fire on the Confederates. 20 times I brought my men to halt and face about, forcing the men to do it. Now think about that.
Wow.
20 times. So I looked at this mathematically a couple years ago because I always kind of wondered, is 20 times realistic or is that just hyperbole?
It sounds to me like they'd have to stop every foot.
Well, I wonder. I used to think that too until I kind of looked at directionally if they're headed back towards Cemetery Ridge. If they're headed back into that general area of around where the Pennsylvania Monument and the wood, as you said, the woods behind to huddle and shiver and all that stuff.
Right.
That's about 1,000 yards. It's about 1,000 yards.
Okay.
So guess what? If you stop 20 times, that's about 50-yard intervals. Half a football field.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Now it's believable.
What the first time I ever did the math, I had the exact same reaction you just did. I kind of said, "Oh, okay, that feels believable."
Sure.
And again, Humphreys, he's this scientist, he's this engineer that, damn it, if anybody under 50 is going to be able to kind of, under fire, is going to be able to pace off 50 yards, it's probably him.
Well,
so I buy it a little more than I used to.
But here's where, and I'm not saying I don't buy this, but this is the problem I have in imagining or totally believing. He's a division commander.
Yeah.
Thousands of men, but he's taken a good deal of casualties at this point, but still probably, thousands of men still. There's noise, there's smoke, there's chaos, right?
Yeah.
How are you stopping these men every 50 yards, 20 times? Like, That's the problem I have. Today I could believe it because we have radio.
Right.
And we could say, everybody halt.
Right.
And then, or whatever the hell the proper term would be. And everybody could do it within minutes of receiving the message, right? But this is a guy and his staff on horseback or on foot now.
I think they're on foot.
Right?
Yeah,
So they're on foot. So they're not as noticeable. There's this smoke everywhere. There's this noise. How loud can you yell? How are you getting the message down?
Well, I think that's probably right. Maybe that's where being the old school profanity yelling kind of guy does. But look, I mean, you're not wrong on all of that. But also too, probably by sight and sound, right? The boss is behind me doing this. His staff is over here. His staff is over here.
He's not with me. He's behind me enough to
And look, 20 times. In the heat of battle, was it 15 times? Was it 12 times? Was it 16 times? I don't know. But I do think, Matt, there's enough accounts afterwards that basically says, look, this guy showed up. He showed up.
Yeah, sure.
He showed up and he took care of business.
Now, I got to say, after doing this show with you and hearing all this, I have I don't even. It's not even a newfound respect for Humphreys. It's a respect for, I never really gave him much thought.
Yeah, people don't think they don't. And again, I know there's a lot of people that are interested in Humphreys. There's a couple, Rich Gore, Dave Donahue. I know there's guys who do stuff on this part of the field. But you're right. As a general thing, this is not a guy or a topic that we spend a lot of time talking about. When was the last time you took a battlefield tour and anybody spent time talking about Brigadier General Joseph Carr?
No,
right? Talk about guys we just don't talk about. So I think that's why it's important to bring attention to this, because the casualties too are horrific.
Well, so I was just going to get to that. So he says in his report that he's got about 5,000 men. What do you does history agree with that?
Yeah. So about 4,900. But again, if we subtract Burling for now, because Burling is fighting, but Burling's fighting on other parts of the field. Right here in this zone, he's got, give or take 3,300.
Okay, that's a great point. Right. Okay, yeah. So he's given the division totals here.
Exactly.
Okay, so he's taken 2,088 losses. I'm going to imagine, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm going to imagine that the bulk of those 2,000 are taken on the Emmitsburg Road action, not necessarily from Burling's brigade.
Yeah, I think, and again, folks, not to dismiss what Burling does on other parts, because we'll get a cue from the booth where Mike will remind us that some regiment in Burling's fought like hell, kind of thing.
Right.
But so if you do the math this way, Humphrey's division in total, we come up with about 43% casualties. If we just do Carr and Brewster, the Emmitsburg Road boys, that's 47% casualties. Wow. And if you just do Carr alone is at about 54% casualties.
Wow.
That's some heavy duty stuff.
That's a lot, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
So, okay, he's got 171 officers as casualties, and say if they're killed or wounded, 1,917 enlisted. 3 officers missing, 263 enlisted missing. So that's the total casualties that he gives there.
Yeah.
Do all the modern...
They're close. They're close. I'll give a shout out here. I use Steve Floyd's Commanders and Casualties for a lot of this stuff. And what Floyd did was he just broke down Busey and Martin into a simple, digestible 1-volume form.
Good.
And they're pretty close. We've got on that version for Humphrey's whole division, 314 killed, 1,562 wounded, 216 missing and captured. So it's close enough.
Close enough,
For government work, folks, it's close enough.
Right. So July 3rd.
Yeah.
Anything of note for Humphrey's division?
Not especially. I mean, you touched on, and I know we kind of shifted over to something else, though, but you did touch on the late, what I'll call kind of the rally on July 2nd. You did touch on that. And I often like ending the Humphreys story with that, because when we think 3rd Corps at Gettysburg, we think Sickles.
Yeah.
We think utter defeat. We think awkward salience and that sort of thing.
Just disaster.
Just a disaster. And, during the retreat from the Emmitsburg Road, Turnbull's battery left like 4 guns on the field, and that was left behind. And we often never think of this in terms of bandana wearing Humphreys, rounding up the guys, probably a sword in his hand, and saying, let's go. And kind of like we touched on before, charging almost all the way back to the Emmitsburg Road.
Yeah.
They don't hold the ground. Then everybody says, okay, come on.
Go back.
Come on back. Now we'll make that coffee for you, kind of thing. But the idea to me that they put it together, and this dude, we didn't talk. He's like 52 years old,
right?
He is not a kid.
He's not a spring chicken.
He's no 6 questions length. He's he's like you or me. Kind of out of
over the hill.
I feel like I'm getting over the hill with each passing minute, kind of thing.
Me too.
But
I feel you are too.
So Well, you did buy dinner this year, so I'll give you that. And you did promote the Sickles book on the Matt Atkinson
You're
thing.
damn right I did,
I
Jim.
thank you very much.
Listen,
for
I
that.
take care of my friends.
I thank you very much for that.
Okay.
Folks, apparently now we're friends. So there you go.
Well,
but anyways,
I'm getting soft in my old age.
I know, right? Because you're like 52-year-old.
I'm like 52. Right? Yeah, exactly.
So that was the point. This old guy, certainly by Civil War standards, I mean, he's 4 years younger than Robert E. Lee, leading that charge back to the Emmitsburg Road. To me, that's an aspect of the Third Corps story that nobody ever thinks about.
And in that charge back to the Emmitsburg Road, they took prisoners, they reclaimed 2 pieces, and they captured the 8th Florida's flag.
Yeah.
According to his report.
His report, yeah. He gives himself credit for the 8th Florida. I don't know that I'd give Humphreys the 8th Florida credit, but who am I to argue with what he puts in his report?
Well, where does he get that from if it's not his
guys
men?
Just all over the place. These guys capture flags and then they give it to the nearest general, right? Oh, thank you very much kind of thing. I mean, we see that all over the place in Pickett's charge. Right?
Yeah. So in other words, you're saying it could have been just picked up off the ground?
I tend to think. That's just my personal opinion.
Okay.
I never gave it a whole lot of thought, I'll admit.
Do you know, is there an account from anybody in the 8th Florida about losing their flag? I would imagine that would be momentous.
Yeah, probably. I have to go back and
we'll have to check that out.
We'll have to double check that. I'm sure there probably is. When I get into the Florida guys losing flags, the mind starts to drift more to July 3rd and Pickett's charge and all that fun stuff.
Okay.
But the point being, they go almost all the way back to the Emmitsburg Road, and they kind of kick some ass in the progress, and that's the really important thing.
What became of Humphreys, the man, and the division after the Battle of Gettysburg?
So after the Battle of Gettysburg, back to your question, really nothing significant on July 3rd. They are in the woods. They do take Third Corps in general takes some artillery fire prior to Pickett's charge. But as we talked about before, July 8th, Humphreys does finally agree to take that chief of staff position with his buddy General Meade. Another quote, may I?
Sure.
So as he later testifies, his brief tenure under Sickles had soured him a little bit, or at least in the Third Corps. Quote, my mortification at seeing men over me and commanding me, who should have been far below me, has destroyed all my enthusiasm, and I am indifferent. Had I been left alone, I should have maintained my position and inflicted severe losses on the enemy. It incenses me to think of it. So I think he's kind of happy for a little while, but he does say when he takes Meade's position as chief of staff, look, this is still temporary. He basically says, until I get command of my own corps, I can't stand anything else. And damn it, Matt, near the end, he's finally going to get command of his own corps, because near the end of the war, 64, November of 64, he finally gets command of the Second Corps.
This was very interesting. I'm glad we did this because, like I said, I've never really given much thought to Humphreys.
Yeah.
And every time I've read, a general history or something, and they get about, talk about the Peach Orchard, it just makes your eyes go cross. It's so confusing. Not the Peach Orchard, but the whole fight down on the south end.
Yeah.
So many moving parts, so many things happening at once, a lot to keep track of. And at the time, I didn't have the Godfrey book. It wasn't written.
Yeah, right.
So it's I'm glad that we did this here. And I thank you for coming and doing it. Now we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and take the questions from our patrons over at patreon.com/Addressing Gettysburg. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, that's how you get to ask questions. You go to Patreon, you become a patron, You get to ask questions. And if you become a first lieutenant, you get to watch these shows being recorded and all the mess ups and all the fun and frivolity we have beforehand, afterwards, and sometimes during the breaks. So we'll take a break and be right back after these words.
Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, Gettysburg's premier museum, is housed in the historic Lutheran Seminary building constructed in 1832, a witness to the first day of battle. The museum's 3 floors of exhibits connect visitors to the dilemmas that led to the Civil War, provide a powerful and personal view of the battle's first day, and explore one of the battlefield's largest hospitals. No visit to Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center is complete without a guided tour of the building's famous cupola, where on the eve of battle, officers and civilians saw thousands of Confederate soldiers' campfires burning to the west, and Brigadier General John Buford watched for vital federal reinforcements as fighting erupted on the morning of July 1st. Today, you can stand where Buford stood and discover how this view helped chart the course of the Battle of Gettysburg. Your trip to Gettysburg is not complete without a serious visit to Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, Gettysburg's premier museum. Purchase tickets online at seminaryridgemuseum.org or call 717-339-1300.
To get tickets or a cupola tour, listeners may call or walk in and mention addressing Gettysburg, or by ordering online using the promo code AG1863 for 20% off.
Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. It began here.
There's a devil to pay.
When you're dragging ass out of bed, the hairs must up on your head. You picture the 20th Maine, and you're happy once again. Fight the battle against being slow with Little Ground Top Road.
This special episode of Addressing Gettysburg is brought to you by our first coffee brand, Little Ground Top, roasted to perfection by our friends over at Bantam Roasters. Take the high ground every morning with a piping hot cup of Addressing Gettysburg's Little Ground Top.
Trademark.
That features notes of cacao, wildflowers, and toasted sugar. I even taste a hint of black pepper in mine. I look forward to my cup of Addressing Gettysburg's Little Ground Top.
Trademark.
Every morning, and you will too. So grab your multiple bags today at addressinggettysburg.com/cafe or drop into Bantam Roasters at 82 Steinware Avenue, across from the Dobbin House, during your next visit to Gettysburg. And hey, now that Little Round Top is open, imagine enjoying a thermos of Little Ground Top while checking out the view from the hill. Outstanding. That's addressinggettysburg.com/cafe or drop into Bantam Roasters at 82 Steinware Avenue during your next visit to Gettysburg.
Who can forget the sounds of the 60s?
The 1860s. I can't, and you can't either. Now, there's Marching Through Georgia, the exciting new album by Billy Webster. All of your favorite hits of the 1860s in one place. Such hits as Gary Owens, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, All Quiet Along the Potomac Tonight, Marching Through Georgia, and much, much more. So what are you waiting for? Go to billysongs.com and order your digital download of Billy Webster's Marching Through Georgia today. That's billysongs.com. For the Historian has a wide variety of titles, new and used, of military books from publishers like Osprey, Gettysburg Publishing, Stackpole, Savas Beatty, UNC Press, and more. I make it a point to go there once a week because I have new bookshelves to fill and I never know what treasures I'll find, and neither will you. They even have toy soldiers, model kits, games, children's books, and more. So stop by and check them out on your next visit to Gettysburg, or better yet, order right now online at forthehistorian.com and mention that you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg in the Note to Seller box, and they will refund you your shipping. And if you call 717-685-5207 or stop by the store on your next visit and mention us, you'll get 20% off retail price. That's forthehistorian.com or 717-685-5207. Civil War Trails is the world's largest open-air museum offering over 1,500 sites and stories for you to explore. Each Civil War Trails site has an interpretive sign to help fuel your imagination as you stand on remote mountaintop artillery positions, in fields where thundering cavalry charges took place, or in now quiet downtowns where raids, riots, or raiders shattered the peace. Over 60 Civil War Trail sites allow you to stand in the footsteps of the Gettysburg campaign across Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, and of course, Pennsylvania. In fact, they are expanding further into Pennsylvania now with the latest sites in Wrightsville, Hanover, and Chambersburg. As you travel the trail, you'll find more than just great history. Beyond battlefields, great barbecue, beer, and bourbon await. Here's a pro tip: carry cash and never book your day completely to ensure that you can take that gravel road, explore that hiking trail, or pick up an amazing artifact from that awesome antique shop you find along the way. Request a free brochure shipped right to your door at civilwartrails.org, and be sure to snap a hashtag sign selfie next time you are out exploring. Click the link to Civil War Trails in our show notes. Follow Civil War Trails and create some history of your own.
If you're a lover of history, then go to trhistorical.com. There, you'll find apparel, drinkware, decor, and more, featuring a wide range of subjects from the ancient world to the Cold War. Looking to make an impression with the perfect gift? Well, TR Historical now offers a vintage wrapping service for a truly unique presentation. And our listeners will save 15% when using promo code GBERG1863 at checkout. So go to trhistorical.com. TR Historical, for the love of history.
You're listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast.
All right, and we're back with Jim Hessler. We're talking about Humphreys division here at Gettysburg, and we're going to get to our questions now here from our patrons. Once again, patreon.com/Addressing Gettysburg. That's how you get to ask questions. And here we go. You know, actually, before we get to the submitted questions, Mike and I were talking about all this before the show. And he had mentioned Humphreys not taking the chief of staff role that was offered to him when Meade went up to Army Command. And Mike, you seemed a little like, kind of like, what are you, crazy? Like, what are you taking, right? Like that was kind of sort of what you were saying?
No, not really.
Well, that's the way I took it.
Okay, well, for the sake of this episode, we'll say that's how I did things.
Well, no, what is your thought on that?
Yeah.
I think my thought on that was, I think he wanted to still be in a combat role.
Yes.
And that really kind of getting on a horse midstream with a battle so imminent wasn't probably the best idea to change chief of staffs right there in that moment.
See, I recall that's what I said. And I think you were like, and he didn't take it. Like you were kind of incredulous. But okay. So we both agree that, he didn't want to leave his men right before a battle. Meade had no choice. He was ordered.
Right.
Now, Meade could have ordered Humphreys, but he didn't.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's right. He said, I order you to do this. That's right.
Yeah, but he didn't. And Humphrey stayed with his men. And I think that was a smart choice because soon after he did go up and accept it. And Joe Denise asked the same question in the comments. He said,
okay,
my question is, did Humphreys know the situation at hand when he first turned down the chief of staff role to stay with the 3rd Corps?
Yeah, great question, Joe. If I could just add there. So, as we talked about, 3rd Corps gets reorged after Chancellorsville. Humphreys gets this division. When Humphreys took that assignment, there's a letter, comment that he writes to somebody saying, basically to the effect, I'm really excited about this position. These guys have a great reputation. And so, I personally don't think he's thinking as much about continuity as about the first part of that. He's excited to be here and he wants field command. And, as it becomes increasingly clear we're going to have a big battle, I want to be on the front lines doing it.
And I have a follow-up on that one. Considering the division that he's commanding, I was reading it off to Matt before the show, the order of battle for that division, but I didn't tell him who the commander of the division was. And it was Joseph Hooker during the 7 days battles.
Mm-hmm.
So about that division, since this is basically their last major battle fighting together as far as in the 3rd Corps, can you talk about the men of that division and how experienced and what the reputation of that was?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on a little bit. I think, for me, the thing is, how do you handle the reputation of the Excelsior Brigade? To me, that's always sort of the wild card in the room. I was in a scenario one time where I was in the museum at the visitor center, and there was a group of guys looking at exhibits, And some guy was just carrying on that the Excelsiors were the worst brigade in the Army, the very worst, kind of thing. And I didn't say anything. I just sort of listened and kind of chuckled at some of it. But and some of it too, I think starts with Harry Fans's great second day book, where he kind of implies, well, the Excelsiors broke and ran and didn't really put up much of a fight. And we know they didn't put up much of a fight because they really didn't write about it afterwards. Well, so what? That's and I got a huge respect for fans, but that's kind of a bridge too far in my opinion.
Yeah.
I certainly think the Excelsiors were. Look, the thing, Gouverneur Warren makes the comment at the Joint Committee of the Conduct of the War that the Third Corps was quote unquote made up of different stock.
Yeah,
I'm paraphrasing, but that's something in the quote that he says. They're made up of different stock than the other corps, and you can kind of wonder what he's talking about: the New York appointments, the lack of West Pointers, and all of that stuff.
Foreigners? Were there a lot of foreigners in it? Like the 11th Corps? Is he blaming that?
Well, can we count Irish as foreigners?
Yeah, they did.
Right. Right, you got that.
They didn't accept Irish people till Kennedy.
No.
Then they shot him.
You got John Tomney. You got at least one known Chinese guy in the Excelsior.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But I think, to me, when somebody says what's their reputation and that sort of thing, to me, the Excelsior Brigade is kind of always the interesting one there. Like whoever talks about Carr or Burling, but the Excelsior guys get kind of a bad rap right off the bat.
And then speaking of the Excelsior Brigade, they have this unique thing where the regiments have an Excelsior designation, like first Excelsior, second, third, fourth. Each regiment is. Okay, let's get to the questions our listeners submitted here. Frank Garcia starts off tonight, and he says, regarding Andrew Humphreys, it has been said that he was well-versed in profane language. We mentioned this before.
Yes, he was.
Where can one go? This is a great question. Where can one go to read the exact profane words that Humphreys would have said? And would his profanity be understood by the average person in today's world? Great question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
That's
go
good,
ahead.
Frank. Well, where could we get the exact quote? Well, my new book, The Collected Profanity of Andrew Humphreys, will be out from Savas Beatty next year, complete with full-color maps.
Wow.
So watch for that highly anticipated release.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. No, I'm not aware of anywhere where the actual profanity can be sourced and
That would be really cool, though, if you did that.
So obviously we have his OR. He cleans it up in the OR. We have his Joint Committee testimony. He cleans it up in there. A lot of his correspondence was published in that biography we referenced earlier. That's all cleaned up. So, if anybody finds the treasure trove of Humphrey's profanity, I'll be the first one in line to read it and see what it says. So, would it be understood? Second part of the question?
Go ahead.
Okay, because I did a little social history on this.
Nice.
Social history on addressing Gettysburg, folks.
First time ever.
So the question again was, would it be understood by a person in today's world? Yeah, for the most part it would. What they referred to as oaths and blasphemous language. When you read wartime accounts, right, there's a lot of, G_D, D_M, let's blast those Yankees to H__L kind of stuff. I'll blow your blank brains out. So I think certainly we would understand a lot of that. The F word.
Yeah.
The F word. Did you know that the F word is a sexual act? Basically dates back to about the 15th century.
Fornication under consent of the king, is that what you're saying?
Something like that. Yeah.
I've heard that.
Yeah. So
no, but I've also heard that's not true.
Well, I've heard that it was true.
I heard it was too until it wasn't.
Well, no, I don't know about fornication under the king. I don't know about that part. I saw one that said something. It was spelled FUQE or something like that. So I don't know about the fornication of the king.
That's I believe what you're thinking of is Scottish martial arts.
Yeah, exactly. But when did this become an expletive, such as it is now, you F and MF or that sort of thing? People aren't as clear on that. There's some indication though that our use of the F word was sort of the same as it was in the mid to late 19th century. So Civil War
Really?
people might have used the F-bomb in the same way we do, but of course, they would not have used it as frequently as we do, right?
Or as cleverly.
Because
I don't think they had words like ton.
Exactly.
Right. Or other ones.
Right. What do they? They have stuff like fiddle-dee-dee and stuff like that I'm sure we would laugh at today. Kind of stuff.
I'm sure fiddle-dee-dee was the polite way of saying
exactly. So really the question is not would we understand them, but would they understand us? I think that's the real question.
They would probably sit back and be like, whoa, I had no idea you could use in so many different ways.
Humphreys would be like, what the F happened to these people?
Yeah.
I fought for this.
Right. Interestingly enough, though, I was watching something about Deadwood.
Okay.
The show versus history.
Yeah.
And one of the points that they brought up was the language, because it is very colorful. And David Milch, the guy who wrote it, said that all those words that they used existed. But even like the seediest people wouldn't have used them as much as we do today.
Exactly.
And because like the basic education that you had gave you a better command of the English language. I'm guessing. I don't know. That's my guess.
Well, and I don't know either. I mean, obviously they often refer to it as blasphemous.
Well, right.
And I'm thinking.
And so that was the point that he made.
Okay,
and you said this before. He said, people cursing back then. Curse word. It's a curse word. It's a religious thing.
Yeah.
And so it was as simple as saying goddamn or hell or damned, because damned means like damnation, hell. You're going to hell. So and to say goddamn is like you don't have the right to tell God to damn something.
Sure.
That's his decision.
Yeah.
So it's blasphemous. And so you didn't have to go very far to be obscene and profane back then.
Right.
So I think we would understand their profanities very easily, and we'd be like, "That's the best you got."
Exactly.
How about this?
I think that's right.
Hey, you window, and then we're like, "Whoa!"
Kind of like Humphreys going back 1,000 yards. We've just moved the goalposts on profanity so far. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, but that was a good question. I like that question.
That was interesting.
I like those social questions.
And I put some thought into the answer, as you can clearly see.
That was good. You looked into things.
We went back to the 15th century on that one.
That's right. James D. He says, if you were to dedicate a Dan Sickles monument at Gettysburg, would it be the July 1st, 1863 ladies' man Dan Sickles, or the fat, old 1913 reunion Dan Sickles?
Oh, James D.
There's no in between, James.
Well, there might be on the answer here. Kind of like the old young Elvis, the eternal debate.
Sure.
Right? Which one? I do have an answer. I'm curious. Do you have a preference, or does Lentz have a question? And then I will give my answer.
I would pick ladies' man Dan.
Young Dan, lady killer.
Well, because, not young, but Gettysburg age.
Sure, right.
July 1st, 1863, ladies' man Dan. I might go the FDR memorial way and show him missing a leg, even though on the first he had his leg.
Yeah.
But still, I would depict him in 1863 because we want to see these guys virile and but he's got missing a leg.
All right.
That's what he's known for. He saved the damn thing. He wasn't afraid to acknowledge the fact that he lost his leg.
Maybe a statue of him holding the leg bone?
Or visiting it.
That's what I'm saying. That was going to be my answer.
Oh, yeah.
Post-war, visiting his leg.
Sorry.
Took
your answer.
So I've got a middle ground.
Okay.
If I had to pick one of those two, I think maybe I would go with young Elvis. But how about we get a middle ground? How about conniving 1864 Joint Committee of the Conduct of the War getting his revenge on Meade Sickles?
Oh, all right.
Right, he's still kind of the Gettysburg.
How would you depict that?
Well, exactly. He's still kind of the Gettysburg age, so he's not old and fat yet. He's probably putting on a little bit of a haunch, because he can't exercise and and all that other stuff.
Right.
But So he's not old and fat yet, but he is still missing the leg, which I think is a signature piece, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to say, let's go with maybe a statue of him sitting at a bench giving conniving testimony.
I like that.
Thing.
I like that. With a dagger in his hand behind his back.
Sure, exactly.
Okay, something like that.
Or maybe putting a dagger into the back of the George Meade statue.
Yeah, that would be good too. George Meade statue. But put it, he's on the back of Meade's horse.
Exactly. I like that, exactly.
With a dagger.
Yeah. Oh, Meade fans across America are clutching their pearls right now.
All right. Brian Svab, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, S-V-A-B. He says, what kind of relationship did Humphreys have with Jefferson Davis before the war?
Yeah, so they were friends. They were friends before the war. Now, it's interesting, if you could indulge me here for a minute. There's a quote, if you have Stackpole's Fredericksburg book, there's a quote that talks about, look, at the outbreak of the Civil War, we're talking 61. Humphreys was initially at that point chief topographical engineer on McClellan's staff. And so Stackpole has this quote that's used in the Fredericksburg book that basically says he was put in position, A, because of his scientific achievements and knowledge, but also because, quote unquote, those in power at Washington distrusted him because of his intimacy with Jefferson Davis before the war. And I don't think, if my memory serves, I don't think Stackpole has a footnote on that, but you often don't see that, or I should say you do often see that repeated. So what's the truth on that? The other thing, too, is sometimes I see on websites, they were good friends going back to their days together at West Point. And that sort of seems to be the fallback. When you can't figure out where these guys knew each other, just assume they went to West Point together, sort of thing. But Davis was at like West Point from like 1824 to 28, and Humphreys was there from like 27 to 31. So at best, they only overlap a year. And is a fourth-year guy really close friends with...
Right.
So, but what I do think is, and I think this goes back to... Davis's term as Secretary of War in the 1850s. You know, I alluded to the fact briefly during the intro about Humphrey's engineering expertise and surveying expertise and that sort of thing. And so during that period, when Davis was in office, Humphreys worked on Pacific Railroad surveys, what was called the Pacific Railroad Survey Office. And it sounds like, and look, folks, I'm no expert on Jefferson Davis, but it sounds like kind of during this period, Davis might have gotten Humphreys involved with that, and I might have assumed they were close to that. It appears that they stayed close up to the eve of Civil War, and there's at least one anecdote that when Davis was first inaugurated as president of the Confederacy, he put together a short list of Army officers that, maybe you'd like to come over and join the team kind of thing.
Okay.
And Humphreys was on that list.
Uh-huh.
And they had a little bit of a meeting with Humphreys, and Humphreys basically said, under no circumstances would I do this. So friends with Davis, but I think the loyalty to the old Stars and Stripes came first, because we didn't talk. Humphreys too came from an old Navy family. And,
okay,
they weren't. I don't think changing teams was in Humphreys' cards. But yeah, the long story short, he does seem to have been friends with Jefferson Davis.
Brian also wants to know if you could go into a little more detail about the Black Horse Tavern incident. How close did it get?
Oh yeah. So we touched about that before, so we won't rehash the story, about how they got lost and why they got lost and that sort of thing. But I know in Brian's question, too, he also kind of said if you have any details on the route and that sort of thing. And maybe I'll touch on that here a little bit. Because, these are sort of the types of investigative scavenger hunts that we I hate the term Gettysburg nerds, but... in your house, I'll play
it's
right?
Getty's Nerds.
Exactly, the Getty's Nerds kind of thing.
Thanks for hating my trademarked.
Excuse me, I just dropped my pen.
All right, Jim is now bending down to get his pen there. He is. He's back.
Yeah, I'm back, folks. So, yeah, I think so Humphreys basically says during that march, remember we said Sickles went on the Emmitsburg Road, Humphreys was on a road. Humphreys' division was on a road about 2 miles west of the Emmitsburg Road. What was the road? Well, nobody really names it. Nobody really describes it. If you took modern day tract road, for example, if you took that out of Emmitsburg, that would kind of fit the description. Humphreys guys in Emmitsburg were kind of over near the Waynesboro Pike. Tract road would kind of be near that. That could work. You take tract road out at some point, then you got to kind of veer over to Pumping Station Road.
Right.
You know, a Sachs Bridge reference, folks.
Yeah.
So something like that might possibly work. Pumping Station Road, tract road. Maybe at one point they turn over on Bullfrog Road. Bottom line is we don't know. We don't know. If you look at the 1858 county map, the map, which I think is a map that these guys were using, what looks to me like Pumping Station Road does run indeed parallel to the Emmitsburg Road. And if you're using that map and saying, well, we were on the road west of the Emmitsburg Road, I think Pumping Station plays a lot into this. I know we're friends with Dave Malgi. Does Malgi listen to the show?
I don't know.
Because Malgi and I commiserated on this years ago, and I was trying to find some of my notes from that conversation. But we were kicking this around years ago, and I don't remember where he came down on that or not. I was just giving Malgi a shout out if he listens. But I personally think between Tract Road, Pumping Station Road, maybe if not Tract, Bullfrog Road, they kind of turn in. But to the rest of the question, I think we kind of talked about that at the beginning. A guide, Inspector General, I think it's Hayden, leads Humphreys guys via the wrong route. It's night. They say they can see the Black Horse Tavern and troops nearby, and they tippy-toe their way back to the Cemetery Ridge.
Yeah, the old tippy-toe.
Exactly.
All right, so Rick Scarce, he says, it sounds like Humphrey's division took the scenic route to the battlefield, and he was none too pleased about how it worked out. Was he mad about that? Did he get kind of pissed?
So he if you read his Joint Committee of the Conduct of the War testimony, it's funny because obviously, as we said, he's not one of Sickles' boys. He's outside of the Sickles circle. And I think in the Joint Committee of the Conduct of the War, he does. When I read his testimony, I see some relish that he's going into and kind of talking about these third corps snafus. Again, we don't have an account where he's like, God, mother, kind of.
Yeah.
He might have done that at 11 o'clock at night, but, was he mad about it? He does talk about it in his Joint Committee testimony. And again, I think he enjoys testifying to how messed up things were in the Third Corps. Even though, again, I'll point out, this one was not Sickles' fault. The guy got the message wrong. When Sickles said to Humphreys, hey, where the hell you been? And Humphreys told him where they went. Humphreys said, Sickles said, I never told him to go by the Fairfield Road. So, sometimes staff officers garble the message.
Now, he asked essentially the same question that Brian did, but the one thing he does talk about here is encounter with Confederates. Now, according to what I read, they missed the Confederates that were on their way to the Black Horse Tavern by minutes, according to Humphreys.
Well, Rafferty writes about it, and I want to say in one of Humphreys' accounts, they do, maybe it's his OR, I forget, but he does, in one of his accounts, he does talk about seeing artillery posted on a hill. Rafferty, who's one of the officers in the Excelsior Brigade, and, writes a lot, take it with a grain of salt kind of thing, says a couple stragglers go up to the tavern and actually see enemy soldiers kind of sitting around the table in the tavern. So missed is a relative term, in terms of, okay, well, we maybe missed having a major collision here, sort of thing. But I think there's guys around, pickets, sentries, guys in the tavern maybe having a drink, some batteries up on the hill. Could have been fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. And finally, Morgan Draper, she wants to know, what did Humphreys think of Daniel Sickles? Did that relationship change before or after Gettysburg at all? So we know already that Humphreys is a Meade man. But did he leave anything behind to indicate what he thought about Sickles?
Yeah, so the closest one that I know of is that quote that I read. I think I read it right before the break, where, again, he kind of talks about it. My mortification at seeing men over me and commanding me who should have been far below me.
Yeah.
Well, there's kind of only two choices there. He's either talking about Sickles, well, three choices. He's talking about Sickles. He's talking about the brief tenure where non-West Pointer Bernie is commanding the Corps, or he's talking about both of them.
Okay.
And I think he's not saying anybody by name, but again, you only have two choices of who he's talking about on that. Mortified. It's taken away all of my enthusiasm for doing this, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I get that sentiment there. That's why I work for myself. Like I never could work for somebody else. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. Jim Hessler once again from the Battle of Gettysburg podcast, author, licensed battlefield guide.
Thanks for having me on Patreon.
Yes, thank you all for listening. And by the way, just in sad news, because this will be out in months from now, but this was recorded. On the dark day that comedian Richard Lewis passed away.
He died today?
He died today.
I did not know that.
Yes. Well, it is breaking news.
Okay.
Right here on Addressing Gettysburg.
Thanks for stealing my thunder.
Sorry. Yeah, people will be over by the time this comes out. Anyway, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Hey, everyone. Before you go, I would like to highlight a friend and supporter of the show, The Badge Maker, your source for authentic Civil War Corps badges and more. Purchase handcrafted, historically accurate Civil War Corps badges from all Corps. Discover a vast collection of military and civilian insignias of various kinds. Experience the exclusive service of custom hand-stamped reproduction ID discs. At his website, civilwarcorpsbadges.com, The Badge Maker brings history to life with precision and passion. Thanks for listening.
Our hearts so stout have got us famed, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale